And for the legislative arm of government, there is no question on the need to increase electricity tariff, but for them, the timing is totally wrong. President of the Senate, Amadi, and the Speaker, Femi Gbajabiamila, had met at the National Assembly with chief executives of electricity regulatory body and discos across the country, and they agreed to defer the planned hike until the first quarter of next year. The leadership of the National Assembly went a step further to engage the presidency on the impending increase in electricity tariff. They want the distribution companies to adhere to the agreements they signed with the government during the privatization exercise. But electricity supply is being affected by cost ineffectiveness or ineffective tariffs, and it is a drawback on the operation of the energy distributors.
Sure that that announcement of the increase in electricity tariff in Nigeria is untimely, and we believe that we need to do more work to ensure that before any increase, there must be some measures, some steps, and some line of actions that must be exhausted, including the metering. And this is a welcome idea to the Vice President as well. This is when they provide services, efficient and effective services to consumers, that they can make money. But in the process, as a government, we too must ensure that we discharge our obligations as provided for in the share purchase agreement signed. And once we're able to achieve that, we would have a better situation in the power sector in Nigeria.
That was President of the Senate, Amadi, there showing his concerns to Nigerians that the National Assembly is averse to that tariff increase. And for more on this, I've now been joined by Engineer Micheal Oluwagbemi. He's the executive partner at LoftyInc and is also a public commentator, and he's in our offsite studio there. And together I have Dr. Sam Amadi here, who incidentally was the former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and is also a Rise News analyst. Dr. Sam Amadi, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Femi, you're also, Micheal, you're also welcome. Let's start off. I mean, this seems very vexatious to the Nigerian people. Vexatious because they don't even have the electricity. So what would have necessitated the increase in tariff by 50 whopping % right now?
Well, first, we should understand that these tariffs are set in batches of 5 years or 10 years. So that means this tariff increase wasn't set anytime this year, next year. This is probably the 2014 tariff. So what that does is that the 2014 tariffs looks at the shortfall, and every year there's also a review. That's one aspect. Secondly, by the time NEC finished consultation on these tariffs and set them up, we've not gone to a pandemic. So primarily, it wasn't like the regulator just within the last 6 months decide to increase the tariff. This probably has been a tariff approved for the discos.
How sensitive is it at this time?
Well, the point whether it
the
should
point
continue.
Is that, yes, it has been set.
Yeah, whether it should continue is a different matter. Now, two issues. For regulators, actually, it's not easy. I totally agree with you. They too know that this is not the right time to increase price of goods and services any type, whether it is fuel, whether it's any other thing, taxation. So governments are lowering even tax, even considering reducing taxes for people so that they can have more money in their pocket. Suspending some in many places. So clearly the timing is wrong. But again, the crisis of this sector is such that we not just to remove the tariff or delay it, but also to provide contingent plans to deal with the crisis. For example, people are paying more consuming no light. You said there's no light, so they're paying more. They pay more to run their generators. They pay more even for estimated bill without light. So the critical focus should be, yes, this is, by the way, suspend the tariff, but more work should be done about how do we improve the financing of the sector. That's critical, because what's happening here is that as long as it doesn't improve the financing, whether by ensuring that the discos bring in more money or ensure that the revenue increases, their collection improves, then they invest in network improvement. Today, we're talking about technically maybe up to 12, 13,000 megawatts that could come to the grid, technically speaking. But we don't have more than 3,500 of, at the best, 800.
It's been like that for 20 years.
So the point it means simply means that there's a total collapse of the distribution sector and the transmission sector in the sense that you would need to fix this quickly. So the idea of those who are pushing for tariff increase is that, look, this tariff increase, if you consider the exchange rate increase, if you consider cost of equipment which are all denominated in dollar, again, you discover that you need to improve that. The question is, how do you increase tariff when the supply is not improving? That's for the public point of view, is that give us the power, we'll pay. But then it's like it's the egg and chicken crisis. Give us the power, we'll pay. The operator says we need investment for that power to come. So at a point, something will give in. Either we finance this sector and then recover afterwards, or we increase tariff and then hope that the tariff would accumulate into meaningful improvement in the sector. So it's a difficult time for regulators, but more importantly, for consumers who will still suffer. This is now rainy season, so we're going to witness a lot of system collapse. Distribution network will go off, small rain, the feeders are
It's only in Nigeria that will see this, when the rains are not hurricane or
exactly, because we don't have network that are strong. These network ought to have been removed and re-networked. Most of the places.
You know the joke in Nigeria that once it rains, and the power goes off, it will take the electricity companies to get towels and start drying the, electricity wires before they can switch on again.
The reality of the matter is that, look, we are suffering decades of no investment, decades of misplacement, inefficiency.
You were in office during the period of privatization, correct, if yes. I remember very well.
Yes.
When you bring in private investors, they're supposed to have come with their own money, with their own technical expertise on how to boost this sector.
Absolutely.
They did not do all that.
That's a problem. You see,
because the government still borrowed discos several billions.
Correct. So what's the underlying problem? The underlying problem is the modeling. You see, when I was, of course, we didn't do privatization, but we are regulator. I've constantly argued that we should have privatized at the time and we did. Why is it so? Unlike telecom, people always say, oh, telecom. Telecom is plug and play. Telecom is government pulls away. Auction, spectrum. You get the spectrum. You put your demands, you roll out. Power needs that you have to dig in, build a foundation. So private sector investment in power, in many countries in the world where we privatize when you have capacity and then it be inefficient, it's costing you a lot of money as government, you pull away. The right guys with the capacity will come in and develop. In Nigeria, we wanted to create the product, create efficiency through the private sector. And by the time we advertised, we want to sell our asset. Those who came to buy, the big companies in the world didn't come because they knew first we didn't even have a company that has an audited account. We didn't even know our customer base at the time we were privatizing. So who came for sure? The people who came for sure are Nigerian businessmen, speculators who could do some MOU with some companies abroad and then access funds from the central bank and other banks in the country, and then they're able to buy the asset. So the point you've made is clear. We, at the stage where we should have first corporatized properly, we should have improved the network, and then we could sell it to people who have the capacity. So we didn't attract those investments. And the idea here is, by the time we make cost-effective tariff, then the new people will see that this sector is profitable and go in. It's difficult to get to cost-effective tariff because
the sector is ever profitable. I mean, even
paper,
as it is now,
they're making money.
They're making loads of money. So where is that money going? Making money where there is no power.
But the truth is that, look, they will report to you several losses. The point about making money in this sector is that it's a long-term, it's a 20-year plan. You need to invest now and recover over time, just like airline. It can't be. That's when Nigerian airlines fail roughly because people think there's something a swoop. No, you invest, you maintain, check. You're going to build a network, meet your customers, put money there. So people who came to show didn't have the capacity.
Doctor, we're going to talk about the metering system and the rest, but let's cross to our off-site studio where Micheal Oluwagbemi joins us now. Micheal, what are your thoughts about this new tariff increase 50%. Do you think it is justifiable, particularly at this time when the world economy is nosediving?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on your show once again, and thanks to your to the other guest. I think he's spoken well and he's laid out the issues before us as a country. It's a time of tough choices. If you ask me, the first thing we need to do is to contextualize the tariff order that was given by the NERC. While everybody has presented it as a tariff order to increase, I think it's more of a tariff order to rebalance the market. What we realized in the past 5 years, 1.7 trillion naira has been given by the federal government to the discos, more or less subsidizing darkness. And those of that 1.7 trillion naira, 60% of that subsidy have gone to 5% of the richest people in Nigeria who get power, while the 40% of the people in Nigeria that continue to suffer poor electricity supply or no electricity at all continue to pay disproportionate amount of cost for their power, even when they get the power, and do not benefit from that subsidy. So what the tariff order is saying, and let's be clear about it, the NERC tariff order that was initially was supposed to kick off April the 1st, but was postponed to July the 1st because of the COVID-19 lockdown. What the tariff order says is that the discos are allowed to negotiate what they call the service level tariff with their respective customers that will be clustered. What that means is that if you are, for example, the Abuja Electricity Distribution Company, would go to people that live in Ibra areas like Maitama and Wuse and say, fine, I'm willing to provide you 20 to 24 hours of electricity, and then that means you have to pay a little more, that 50% that you talk about. And then to those people that will get maybe 18 to 15 hours of electricity a day, then they will get a little bit of escalation, but not up to the 50% you talked about. In fact, under the new tariff order, those people who continue to enjoy electricity at the current level will not see any tariff increases. This tariff order, by the way, is meant to achieve two things. One, is meant to ensure that distribution companies provide electricity commensurate to the tariff that they charge. That's one. Two, it's also to ensure that the subsidy that will be provided.
All right, Michael,
yes.
Let me just put you on pause. You continue on that line of argument of the tariff order, explaining it for us. We want to take some messages. When we return, we'll continue the interrogation. You're still watching the Arise interview. We've got more still to come. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Rise interview with me, Christian Ogdowa, live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Before we return to our discussants, let's take this. As you may have heard, electricity distribution companies in Nigeria did accuse the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, of trying to dissociate itself from the July 1st increase in the electricity tariff plan. The discourse set the increase in tariff and the commencement date were both approved by the NERC, the electricity regulatory body. However, the planned electricity tariff hike, scheduled for July 1st, has been postponed until the first quarter of 2021. That may just be on paper because indeed the tariff has taken effect since on Wednesday. We're going to interrogate that more. A review of the new tariffs showed that price increases would have ranged from 60% in places like Ikeja to about 73% in Abuja and about 78% in Enugu. Nigerians have condemned the tariff increase, saying the electricity situation should get better first before an increase. We'll continue our discussion in a moment, but first, here is Sunday Odunta, the Executive Director, Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors, speaking about the challenges in the power sector.
I think what we need to observe as people, as a nation, and as stakeholders is that it is important for government to respect the sanctity of contract. When you sign a contract with private sector, even public sector, or anybody, any company anywhere, you have to live by the tenets, the wordings of that contract. what seemed to be a problem was the fact that when the contract was signed in 2013, and the government, the federal government then promised to do certain things like committing to doing 1, 2, 3, 4, and asking the incoming investor to do 5, 6, 7, 8, and saying that the performance of 5, 6, 7, 8 is conditional upon me, federal government, performing 1, 2, 3, 4. And soon after signing the contract and taking over on the 1st of November 2014, the same government reneged on every single thing. One of those things, if I may point out, is the fact that the federal government promised that as we are selling this thing to you, the discos haven't paid $1.4 billion cash paid to the federal government, we will ensure that from day one, you will be selling the product at the appropriate price. Appropriate price, call it any kind of price. What that simply means is that we will be considering the cost of production before we fix the price of the product. And I think that is fair enough. But that was not done. A lot of things happened. Even the issue of what they were meant to do, which they didn't do, like the first 2 years, they said, we'll give you $100 billion subsidy, knowing the kind of antiquated and the kind of entity we're selling to you, and the fact that the labor that were then protesting against privatization did not even allow you to access some of the facilities. We'll give you $100 billion first year and second year. Up to today, not one has been given. I can go on and on. When they gave us the nutrient target, what they asked us to supply is far, far below what Nigerians need. But we understand that fact because everything they asked us to do in a capital expenditure has to be within the component of the tariff. So if they ask us to spend so much money, the tariff will go up. But for Nigerians who do not understand, oh, these costs are useless, oh, this, we know that we are the one that people think are the bad guys in the sector. When people don't have light, it is the discos. The discos don't turn on the light or turn it off. The discos are not producers of electricity. The discos are not transporters of electricity. But I must admit here on national TV, the discos too are not efficient enough. All of us have a lot of work to do.
Okay, I still have with me Engineer Micheal Oluwagbemi, the executive partner at LoftyInc. He's also a public commentator. He's in our offsite studio. And Dr. Sam Amadi, who until 2015 was the executive chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, and of course today is a Rise News analyst. Let me return to the offsite studio where we have Micheal. Micheal, you were talking about the tariff order and the sectoral allocation of these tariffs. Can you continue on that line of thought so that our viewers can understand you better?
Absolutely. I think, like I stated previously, the intent of that tariff is that more of the subsidy that is currently being provided, which is up to 1.7 trillion, contrary to what Mr. Oduton just said, in the last 5 years have been spent by the federal government on the sector and given to the discos, and yet the discos continue to supply us darkness. 1.7 trillion of that money, 80% have gone to the richest 5%. Now, what the federal government is doing with this new tariff order is to ensure that the richest people that continue to get the most electricity pay their fair share of the electricity bill. And also ensure that the poorest people that get less than, I believe, less than 45 kilowatt hour in a month, pay what they continue to pay currently. They will in fact be paying about 4 naira per kilowatt hour, down, which is about what they get right now. So the intent is to reallocate and to restructure the subsidy away from subsidizing the rich to ensuring that only the poorest get most of the subsidy, and also freeing up monies that can then go into rural electrification, ensuring more Nigerians get power on a general basis. Now, the intent is also, on the other hand, to ensure that the discos do their fair share. The discos continue to blackmail the government, in my own opinion, by saying that the government has not done its own share of ensuring that people pay their fair share for electricity. However, I think that is wrong. That is you almost, it's as if you want to declare that the electricity sector is not to be regulated. It's a regulated sector. And the government must also respond to the larger social, political, and economic situation of the country. The government cannot willingly allow you to charge people with the hope of you being able to recover your costs. And the second thing also is that the government should also, this is going to force the discos to invest in their infrastructure, because the excuses that the government did not allow them to charge what they can charge will suddenly disappear. Because if you look at it, they keep shouting cost-reflective tariff, cost-reflective tariff. Most discos in Nigeria today do not remit 50% of the actual tariff that they are currently charging. So if you are getting a product for free, as the discos do, they don't pay the gencos, they get their product for free, and then you are told to actually go out there to collect your money, and you're only collecting 50%, even sometimes 10, 15% in some discos across the country. And then you come around to say the reason why you are not able to supply us electricity is because you cannot collect cost-reflective tariff. No, collect what is 100% under the current tariff situation, and then maybe you can have an excuse. But what the government is basically doing here is taking away the last excuse of the discos. They can step up to the game, they can do their part, they can invest in their network, and also we have to understand that part of these subsidies that the government is going to be paying now going forward to the poorest people in Nigeria for their electricity will be coming from a World Bank $750 million facility, I believe 40% of it. And a condition for that facility is that the discos will have to go through what they call forensic audits. And I think this is the reason why the discos are now in court, trying to sue the government. They're trying to eat their cake and have it. They basically now have to step up to the game and do business. They have to stop depending on overcharging Nigerian estimated bill. They have to stop depending on charging Nigerians for what they do not consume. They have to stop depending on collecting subsidy. Their business model now is collecting subsidy for supplying darkness. That has to change from July the 1st.
Yes, indeed, it has to change from July the 1st, but it has already changed. The tariff has already been effected. I have evidence here where before July 1st, a 20,000 naira electricity unit will give me 700, but today it is less than 400 for the same amount of 20,000 naira. Why the disparity? Ikeja is going to, have this order of tariff. Abuja is going to have about 78 kobo or naira or so. And we know we have rural Abuja.
Well, I think we need to understand this very clearly. The tariffs are based on cost of supply. So, and the cost of supply is a bunch of variables, including customer numbers, including density of population. So that, for example, the lines, the network, including also the company's efficiency level. So if you have more people in your staff book that go and do collections, the O&M will increase, operation and maintenance cost increases. So clearly, it won't have the same cost across the
board
distribution license areas. But the critical thing here is the plan that NEC has is, for me, laissez-faire.
Okay, sorry, Doctor, I have to stop you there because we're going to take some messages. You're still watching the Arise interview. We are going on a short break now. When we return, we'll continue our discussion. Stay with us. You're welcome back to the Arise interview with me, Christian Ogodowo, live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. I still have with me Engineer Micheal Oluwagbemi, the executive partner at LoftyInc, and he's also a public commentator, and Dr. Sam Amadi, former chairman of the NERC and a Rise News analyst. Sam, before I cut you short there, you were trying to expatiate on the tariff order and maybe the beauty of it too, to the consumers.
Absolutely. So the point was making is that the tariffs differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because of the cost components. The cost profiles differ, the customer number of customer, the O&M operation cost, different network density. So you expect, like Ikeja, where you have the high density, the cost
loads
of service
manufacturing
will be
companies
less.
There, yeah.
Cross subsidy will be more because of the businesses to take off. So that's part of it. Then a place like Yola, Southeast, I don't know why, maybe historic level of inefficiency in the disco is part of the problem. Now, again, the point also about the rich capturing the subsidy is true because of how we structure the tariff. And so in many countries in the world, we have two-tier tariff, which means you consume up to X, let's say 150 kilowatt hour a month. The rate could be plus 10 naira or 5 naira, okay? X, okay, let's say X. Then if you consume after that, if your consumption goes up, the next after 150 or 100 kilowatt hour attracts a different unit price of X plus 1. So the point there is that it captures straight more consumption. So if you're consuming more, then you're paying more. Again, it can use at socioeconomic levels where we have means tested to know who is rich and poor, income level. So you can say, okay, certain class of consumers are subsidized by what they call consumer consumer assistance fund. It's in the act. So it's the disco themselves who have the profile of their customers and know their load base, low demand. This is how much you consume. You live in a 2-bedroom flat, and your units are just telephone, television, AC, and a fridge.
That's when the places are not metered.
No, that means you have to meter.
Yeah.
So they will know. Then they will not put you on assistance fund. So they will use that fund to subsidize their consumption directly. So what we are doing now is that the rich are capturing the subsidies. That's correct. But then what the NEC wants to do now, we'll not cut it, because that means two things can happen. The discos have incentive to front load power to the point where the tariff is high. Then you have under consumption by the poor. So it becomes a new kind of inequality, access to energy. So it has the impact that, look, of course, the rich would like to pay more to have more power. But then the poor, so to say, we have the same tariff, but with no power supply. Then it raises a challenge for regulator. But again, we can say, why don't we say, okay, all those who are on maximum demand meter, that means those who have their own transformer, because they have an improved power quality, the tariff can be recalibrated, so they have higher tariff because they're getting quality power that is better because they're taking straight from the transformer. Then those of us, those who don't have, who share, the R2 customers and R1 customers will not have the normal tariff. But primarily, we need to go back to redo the tariff in a structured way. For example, we talk about R1 with the subsidy. Nobody's R1 in Abuja. R1 is just one bulb in one hut. It may be far away, Kala Namoda. You don't have those customers on R1 in Abuja. So when NEC says that R1 is subsidized, they don't pay anything significant. The question is, who is R1? How many are there? So I think that, yes, the design, the logic of freeing the tariff from subsidy and allowing the poor to be directly subsidized and the rich paying what they ought to pay is a good one. But in this new design, that doesn't seem to me to
accommodate,
to accomplish that in an efficient way. Again, I would say that also the way the tariff was stopped is not good. They should have allowed NEC should have gone before 2 months ago to have done some consultation and come out with a statement that said this tariff will not happen again, so that industry will say that it's a decision.
It's not going to happen until another 5 years.
Exactly.
Oh, the next people, they don't speak to the press at all.
No, that's wrong.
You call the executive chairman, or you call this. I mean, Professor
they
Momo, no, he doesn't talk to the press.
Before now, to have done it in a regulatory manner. What it does is that the investors out there need that this is not government risk, this is not government intervening, using policy to abort regulation. But this regulator doing a market industry-based assessment and saying, look, in the view of the COVID-19, with this tariff, July can't come because of these economic indicators and impact, but we will mitigate the hardship on investment by X, Y, Z. So what I see is, what I don't like is that it's like National Assembly goes the eve before, talk to you and say slam dunk, no tariff. Someone in Washington trying to make business investment will see that as a sector that has no independent regulator, and therefore it's risky to invest in. So everything we have done should have done without political intervention. They would have spoken to the NEC people from behind. NEC leaders should have been the ones a month before consulting, talking to the media, meeting the operators and say, look, this tariff is deserved because of X, Y economic factor, but because of this socio-economic intervening factor, the fact that people are losing jobs, the fact that income level is low, the fact that we want to give people...
So why the reason for a tariff increase right now?
But the way it is done now is politically risky. It sends a wrong signal. It tells the world that, look, the contracts, the process in this market is not bankable. I would have preferred a regulator-led intervention to say we delay this tariff furthermore, and then back up with evidence-based regulatory, decision-making process, and then the document will speak for itself. A fact sheet that tells the story.
And how will government, because government still owns some percentage in these businesses, they are not 100% privatized. And
they are privatized. Government has shares, basically. Yeah.
That's why
the discos are 60-40. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, and that's why government still funds, the discos, even the Gencos too, as well.
Well, government funds because government is public good. Government is supporting. Yes.
We know. You can't leave it in the hands of the private sector in total because of, they say, national security and things like that. Yeah. But how can government, with this present situation, subsidize electricity, like you've explained, with the tariff orders.
Yes.
Is metering not the way to go?
If I was to advise government, I would say pull off from any further financial intervention in the sector. Free the operators to charge the tariff they want, but the critical thing, at least regulated by NEC, what to call just and fair tariff. But see metering as a public good. Provide metering to all Nigerians, especially those who are the low income, who can put themselves, and then ask the discos to charge the cost-effective tariff. Now, what it does is two things. There are so much waste of electricity, even though we don't have it.
Yes.
And 1 power conserved is cheaper than 1 megawatt conserved is cheaper than 1 megawatt constructed. Mm-hmm. Now, what do? Every consumer will have incentive to shut down, to reduce consumption, knowing that they are paying as they consume. Then, if you increase, then you pay more. But now, the problem is that with over 45 to 50% or more of consumers unmetered, every so-called tariff increase is actually exploitation on the meter customer, because basically they have two threats. They can't conserve their energy, because even if you don't consume reasonably, you still get the same amount of bill. So you have no incentive to conserve. Second is that, look, because you can't conserve, you can't reduce or change your volumetric impact, the bill you get at the end of the month. So you are like a captive customer. And that's where the discos will outsource all their shortfalls to make money. You are captive. You're going to pay the same bill. You can't know how to control your bill, your consumption. So if you meter them, then the incentive to control their cost, individual incentive goes up. And then you can have revenue based on increase in tariff and revenue. So what's happening with increased tariff and the high metering gap existed, then it's double punishment for especially the poor. Those are most of the people, the low income people, those who don't normally have access to meter. The richer ones can pay for meter, and so some of them are already on maximum demand. Some of them already have, companies have a way, their own estimation is worked out. They're metered because the discos like to meter bulk purchasers, because that's big money for them. So clearly, we need to get back to say, look, can't we provide these meters as a form of direct intervention and a free support to discos, and ask the discos look for the money and improve the network and charge tariffs that are regulated but cost reflective. Again, if they can't source the funding, then that tells us they don't have the capacity to manage the network, and the regulator can use a regulated process to exit them and get people who can borrow the money, make the investment, knowing that the tariff is now cost-reflective. But the main instrument for social justice in the industry, which is metering, is provided for especially the poor consumers.
Absolutely, Sam. Let's cross to Micheal again in our offsite studio. Micheal, I don't know if you think metering the people, government using it, as a social intervention, so that the discos and the gencos can have their tariffs, increase power generation, distribution becomes efficient, and the AEDs and all the electricity companies can say they are smiling to the bank, while the people are happy to pay for what they consume and not what they don't consume. Is metering the solution?
It's definitely part of the solution, and I've been a key advocate for 100% metering and the ban on estimated billing. Something I strongly believe in, and I also have to second what Mr. Amadi had already just mentioned about the lack of regulatory backbone. I personally believe that NERC have been very weak in terms of regulating this industry since inception, and this is the time for them to stand up for Nigerians. First and foremost, the NERC's order about metering have continuously been violated. We understand that a couple of times late last year, the NERC actually wrote some of these discos that they were going to deal with, they were going to issue some kind of punishment for violating these metering orders. But we've not seen any of such punishment. So unless the NERC steps up to the plate and actually start being a regulator and stop being laissez-faire, as my co-guest has already mentioned, then we'll continue to see violations of NERC orders. I believe, first and foremost, that every Nigerian should be metered. Estimated billing should be done away with. And because it doesn't take much. These distribution companies, after all, are supposed to distribute what they don't produce. Again, let's remember this. They don't produce electricity. Yet they keep a bulk amount of the amount they actually claim they don't collect, and then return pittance back to the GENCOs and the transmission company of Nigeria. We as a country need to take a stand and say, look, we are going to meter every Nigerian, one, and if that has to be by way of intervention or by way of direct provision of these meters, by way of people being able to acquire their own meter and being able to then recover the sum, the mechanism can be worked out. I believe 100% metering is non-negotiable. And then also, the regulator itself has to ensure that it is enforced. Because what we repeatedly see in this system is that the regulator says something and he insists that it's going to do something, and then there's no enforcement. We need to see a couple of discos actually lose their license. We need to see a couple of discos actually end up with zero on their balance sheet because the government decided to take over the companies because they violated the agreement, in terms of agreement that they took over the companies on. So I think that we need to get to a regime where we actually start enforcing the law and enforcing the regulation rather than allowing the discos to run wide and the way they like around the sector. Now, talking about the current regulatory environment and the need for consultation, I personally think that NERC had done its part. Previously, earlier in the year, there was a nationwide consultation that was done on this particular tariff order. I believe I sat in a couple of those public hearings and public sessions where people actually came forward and said, look, I live in Sokoto, I live in Niger, I live in Kwara, and I'm willing to pay X amount because I already pay 120 naira per kilowatt hour for my generator. And so if you are saying the cost reflective tariff is 53 naira, for God's sake, I'm willing to pay it if you give me increased electricity. And that was the basis on which this current tariff order was done. Again, it's not an increase, it is a service level based tariff order. What that means is that if you get more electricity, you pay for more. So it's almost very much in line with what my co-guest had mentioned, except with the part where it is not tiered, and neither do we have the metering being enforced 100%. But I believe that we can continue to improve and build on this mechanism. It's high time we take away the last excuse that the discourse have for putting Nigerians in perpetual darkness. Secondly, I also think that when the consultation that was done that resulted in an order that was supposed to start on April 1st, of course, the entire country was locked down. The world was locked down. Everybody understood the reason why that tariff order could not start on April the 1st. Now, on the July 1st tariff order, you already agreed with me and you already know that the discourse are already implementing it, whether the National Assembly say what they like. We know that our National Assembly are usually full of
Engineer Michael,
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you short again at the nick of time, you know. Let's take some messages. When we return, would aggregate all these issues and look at the role of TCN and other components of the electricity sector in Nigeria. You're still watching the Arise interview. We've got plenty more still ahead. Stay with us. Okay, you're welcome back to the Arise interview with me, Christian Ogdowo, live in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. So they have Engineer Micheal Oluwagbemi, who is the executive partner of LoftyInc and the public commentator, and Dr. Sam Amadi, a one-time executive chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission. Let me still stay with you briefly in our offsite studio, Michael. When you look at the DISCOs, the GENCOs, and the transmission company of Nigeria, you see so much disconnect from the transmission company, who is supposed to be the off-taker of the electricity generated to distribute before it gets to the DISCOs. And you find that not so much in terms of quality technical inputs and infrastructure have been put in place by these three electricity agencies or, components or companies. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, this is an inherited problem. I think, again, aligning myself with Mr. Amadi, the privatization process in many ways was bungled. Not only did you have a bunch of people without capacity buying a lot of these companies, especially the distribution companies. You also had the method of a privatization of a sector that was not ready, that had no capacity, to then decide to privatize it in a fragmented manner. I think what they call the Indian model was the wrong approach. As a power engineer of global experience and done this around the world, advising companies, both large and small. I think Nigeria would have been better suited with a less fragmented approach to our privatization program. Today, you have too many hands in the kitchen that spoils the soup. You have of course, you even missed out the HEMBET, which is supposed to have been an agency that should have been sunsetted by now, but continues to function and continue to function badly in the system. They're supposed to collect money from everybody and then distribute it. But the reality is that the discos hold on to the money, send it whatever they want to send upstairs, and the HEMBET gives Gencos and Transmission Company of Nigeria what they like. The reality is that we are too fragmented. I wish we can actually undo a lot of these parts, reduce. I think the Gencos, for the most part, it makes sense for them to be owned by the private sector as much as they are owned. But I also think that we need to find a way to actually consolidate the sector, similar to what we did in the banking sector. And again, this can only be done by the NERC. There's no reason why the NERC cannot have some kind of order down the road once we stabilize the system to say that every disco must have X amount of generation within their disco. Suddenly, there's an incentive for the Gencos and the discos to merge together. Today, you have a lot of these Gencos producing electricity that are stranded. NDPAC have thousands of megawatts of electricity that it cannot sell, that is spinning at its different facilities. Why can't it just sell to the nearby disco where the electricity is being produced, instead of incurring line losses and all of the kind of inefficiencies that the TCN in the system introduces to the electric power sector? So I think there's a lot that can be done even with what we have today if we reorganize and reconfigure the sector. But we have to tackle the problem one at a time. Currently, I think the biggest bottleneck in the sector is the distribution sector. They even reject load. I mean, we have load rejection that is going on at the distribution level because they have no capacity, the infrastructure is old, there have been no investment. The people that are operating, they have no capacity. They are also being a very high level of lack of transparency, which is the reason why the discos are now in court trying to sue the federal government, because the federal government wants to audit them, wants to do a forensic audit, and then there will be evaluation that will be done before there's any kind of new investment. I think this is the right path to take. Let's start from the part of the sector that impacts the people. And also let us ensure we bring back some enforcement, and let's bring back metering. We need to ensure that every Nigerian consumer is metered. And to me, that's not negotiable. I personally think the National Assembly is better off focusing on this particular issue. I believe the Speaker had been focusing on the issue of metering and estimated billing. I think this is more productive than trying to roll back a regulatory order that's already more or less in effect. As I said previously before the break, the consultation is ongoing. I don't think the National Assembly has the power under the Constitution to undo an executive action, nonetheless to undo a regulatory order by NERC. So I don't think the discos are really listening to the National Assembly. So the effect of the billing is already going on. But consultation is being done. I believe the Vice President, who is the chairman of the working group that the President set up for power sector, met with the National Assembly officers about 3 days ago. And there's been an agreement. They now have a better understanding that this is not an wholesale increase in tariff across all Nigerians.
All right, Michael. I think your points are well taken and noted. We even have an example of a generating station, Toppled power station, with two generating stations there, contributing close to 2,000 megawatts. And the whole of that town, the local government, the two local governments there, they have never had lights. They don't see lights there. Very no sad. Electricity. The Very host sad. Community of two generating plants. That's part of the inefficiency he's trying to point out. The Niger Delta Power Holding Company generates a lot of power, but it cannot offload it. And NRC, NIBET, with all the powers to make this happen, are circumventing the development of the electricity sector in this country.
Well, I think, like he said, I mean, there are things we got wrong. And reform is iterative. You make a reform, you review what you've done, you improve. But our own is disjunctive. So we make a reform, we cut it off, we start again. Before we left, we had started on CapMe, which is a strategy for crowdsourcing finance for metering, so that consumers themselves will pay for the meter, and if within 15 days, you must meter them. And then if you don't, and in an account that is joint escrow account belonging to the installer, who has incentive to make sure that the payment is made and the metering is happening. So we are doing that. We need to fast track it, enforce more. Then suddenly, the Minister of Power then came with a new metering. We have to license meters, and it becomes bedlam. So we need to, like I said, sort ourselves out through regulation. I'm not in support of political interventions, interruptions. There was a time I cancelled the tariff before I left, but I had to do a consultation. It's NEC. No politicians pushed us. Again, you're talking
because
about
it's there in the laws,
exactly,
it's there in the
you have the
act.
power. Again, and it's a industry-based process. It's peer review, it's evidence-based. You may not be right all the time. The regulator may make mistake, but based on evidence, on science, it's both law, economics, everything. They come back, you look at the process, you look at the
Every
impact,
5 years.
you come back and change it. Again, he talked about, structuring the structure. For example, the idea, and it's right, there's some coordination problem between generation, distribution, and the approach we took of unbundling has its own crisis. It requires high level of coordination, high level of technology, and governance in the sector. We don't have that. Then the regulator is the one who can exit the discourse, set the benchmark, like I said. This is the tariff, this is the process, this is the expectation. If they don't perform, you can merge, you can cut off through regulated in the process. And the idea of regulation is that, look, everybody knows that there's a rule. You set the rules beforehand. People play by the rule. When they fail, you carry out audit. In the first 6 months of privatization, we had a snap audit that showed us how much was being embezzled, and we have to punish. But if government says we're doing audit of an industry that's regulated, no, that's wrong. The regulator has a capacity of accounting and auditing.
Order.
Then within the audit, you now punish accordingly. You penalize. But when government says, oh, there's corruption.
But the discourse are in court over that, even for government saying that, look, let's do forensic audit.
Why does government always use politics? What's the regulator for? The law is very clear. They can take a license. Which court are you going to? Again, don't forget
I talked about how, like a bicycle, that the regulator is right now.
I wrote a letter to the chief judge of Abuja. I said, judges should not be giving us order. They don't know what they're talking about. All over the world, on Chevron against in the US Chevron case, it's very clear. The regulator should be deferred to. The Supreme Court says defer to him. He knows the industry. Judges can't sit in Lagos and Abuja and then go and issue orders against the regulator, whereas the issue's been discussed. It doesn't mean that they'll be reckless. They are following the rules. So the regulator is the one that should audit them. And if they fail, punish them. When government says they want to audit, they throw up a lot of political concern. Is this going to be opposition party want to take over the industry? Again, like I said, stop this idea of let's cancel privatization. There is enough room in the regulatory process to take people out, to cancel all the error. But once we say public hearing, and the argument is take back the network, you are killing this sector. Nobody's going to make any investment in a sector where politicians are calling the game.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Sam Amadi, for your well thought out submissions there. Dr. Sam Amadi, former executive chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC, and a Rise News analyst. Thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you. And
our off-site studio guest, engineer Micheal Oluwagbemi, as the executive partner at LoftyInc Corporation. Thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja. Goodbye, and thanks for watching.